bubbles, dark basement, scuttles, fingernails.
Hello, witches. Welcome to the Great North Witches Collective, where we're working to create an inclusive environment for witches to explore the controversial and meaningful topics of the craft and the challenges of being a witch in the modern world. Today we're having an open conversation about what makes a witch a witch. This is early days in our podcast, but as we move forward, we're hoping to do more live recordings so our listeners can share their own experiences and become part of the collective. So make sure to join our Facebook group, Great North Witches Collective, or subscribe to our monthly updates on our website, greatnorthwitches.com. I'm Rose. I'm a traditional astrologer and probably identify most closely as a hedge witch, and I'd love to introduce you to the rest of the collective I have here with me tonight. On my left, I have the lovely Kory.
Hello, everyone. So let's start off with a little bit of something about myself. So I've been a witch for probably about 20 years. I've dabbled a lot in different things, down different paths, tried different things. I'm more of an eclectic grey witch is what they would title me as, which I wear very proudly. So I am the pinnacle of chaotic magic. I love everything that is not in the normal. A little bit of black, a little bit of white. It's that perfect balance of gray in between.
Hi, my name is Kyla. I'm Kory's biological sister, and I am also a witch. I identify as a eclectic pantheist hedge witch that also practices chaotic magic. Like my sister's background, we carry a lot of same experiences, trying out different things to find what suits us best. I am also a artist, and I like to incorporate as much as my artwork into my craft as possible, because for me it's just kind of one and the same. Both my energy and love goes into both.
Hey guys, my name is Nikka, also known as a fantastic witch with a PH, not an F. Eventually you'll be able to find me on all the socials with that handle, but I'm not quite there yet, so stay tuned. I'm an eclectic / Celtic witch, and my practice typically stems around hedge witchery and stuff around my home.
Hello, my name is Aédan, and I have been practicing my craft for about 12 years. I never really labeled my craft, but some would say I'm eclectic, and I have been exploring hedge witchery, really working with the land around me, and I do a lot of work with my ancestors.
To start us off, I'm going to read a nice quote here from Basic Witches, which is a book written by Jaya Sexina, and Jess Zimmerman. The modern witchy zeitgeist doesn't only glance backwards into childhood. It looks forward to the future of powerful and defiant women. Witchcraft appeals to the weird, the outcast, and the unconventional. It has long been a spiritual practice belonging to those on society's fringes. And cultural images of witches gleaned from history and movies and books and TV resonate particularly with women who reject the strictures of expected female behavior, women who are trying to connect with something stronger and scarier. So I don't know if that interacts with anyone's own opinion of witchcraft and what a witch is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that historically, obviously, there's been a huge association of witches with being outcast simply because when we look at the witch trials and the burnings,
Exactly.
it was people that were not considered the norm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think even beyond the witchcraft trials, right? I mean, you can start going into like folk magic.
Yeah.
And typically anybody like in these villages and towns and stuff like that, as populations increased all over the world, your folk magic practitioners were always kind of on the outskirts of town too, right? They weren't the super popular people. They were the people you went to in a case of emergency.
Yeah.
And they were always just kind of on the fringes. They weren't right in the heart of everything.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting, because I was looking up the word witch, right? And because, of course, you got to like, where's this word come from? And the word witch itself is not really that old from what I saw. But magic, obviously, like, especially dealing with astrology and stuff like that, there's magic texts that date back like 3,000 years. So for me, my question was, when did witch become a bad word? Because obviously the word specifically witch isn't that old, but the words before that, like magi or sorceress or something like that, are much older. When it comes to what a witch is, it's almost in some ways a little limiting, because I think that it almost forces us to ostracize ourselves or make ourselves feel like we're not good. Like we have to get through all the stigma of what that word carries, when really there's a practice in an art that's way older that wasn't necessarily stigmatized until the 1400s and the 1600s, like between the major burning times. So I'd love to, I know.
I'm sorry, I'm waiting, I'm trying to wait.
No, that's perfect.
No, I think linguistically, witch originally was a negative term. Yeah. Like, I don't think it was a positive term until
we took
probably the advent of like Wicca.
Yeah.
Right? When that started to gain popularity, and that's when we took it back. So I mean, that's that stigma that you're building through. You're taking a word that was always meant to be negative. Even when you look it up, like the dictionary definition of the word witch, you get that woman that practices magic, but it's always with some sort of negative connotation to it. And then underneath that, it's always like something about an old bitter woman.
It is, yeah.
Like that's always the second part of that definition, is an old bitter woman, or grouchy or grumpy, or some connotation of being a bitch.
Some hag.
Yes, that's actually a synonym for the word witch, is hag.
So an easy question for me is, do you all associate with the longer history of magic that was before the stigma, or is what you feel you identify with most closely is that growing from the stigma into something beyond it?
Definitely before.
Yeah. So I find that super interesting, because it's almost like we don't have a word.
I have a word.
You do? I do love to hear the word. You came prepared.
I came prepared because I feel really strongly about this. So I don't like the word witch. Anytime anyone would ask me, okay, are you a pagan? Are you a witch? Do you do Wicca? I'm like, no, and no. And, it was like, no, I don't like the word witch. It made me feel uncomfortable because there were so many negative connotations that associated with it. And I never felt comfortable about it. So I prefer to be called a conduit.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
So you are a conduit of energy from the earth and your ancestors and everything like that into present day. You channel that energy. You use that energy to do what you do on a daily basis, right? So humans, we are conduits for the earth. We are that connection.
Do you find it hard to identify your practice sometimes because you leave it so open with that term?
Because of that, that's why it's taken me so long, after 20 years of doing this, that it's taken me so long to give it a label or name, because I couldn't find one that suited properly. Like, there's so many different types of witches, but it just didn't make sense, because being a conduit, I didn't feel like it fit in anywhere perfectly. So, I mean, being as a gray witch, it's because I pull more towards the chaotic, right? Energy is not good and bad. It just is. And it's that perfect balance, like the yin and yang. It's balanced nicely, but it can be used when geared and conduit, energized, which way you want to go.
It's interesting because you mentioned not fitting in, which I think is a huge theme in the witchy magic world. And I'd love to hear either if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, because what Kory said made me think of something. It's just funny because there was a couple times I was asked, are you a witch? And it was by men. And I said, well, that depends entirely on your definition of a witch. And then I just left it at that. Because it's true, right? There's the Hollywood definition. There's the definition that were like these Blair Witch Project, mysterious people in the woods. Which, I mean, hey, if anyone's down for that, I'm down. But there's all kinds of definitions now to what a witch is, and it's become very loose. And like some of us agreed, we connect more to the term witch from prior, before the Hollywoodization, I should say, of the term witch, before the trials and all that stuff, when it was the healers, which is what I connect to. But I'm a sucker for learning about witch trials also, and I do find I connect to a lot of those stories as well. So yeah, I just thought that was, it came up into my head, and I was like, well, that's your definition of a witch. I'm not going to let you call me a witch if you think I'm going to kidnap your child.
Yeah, if you think it's a negative. It's funny because the first time I remember telling someone I was dating that I was a witch, he goes, oh, you're a bitch. Thought that's what I was trying to say without swearing. And I was like, no. But obviously I stopped the conversation because I'm like, well, if you can't even handle the word witch, then...
Well, it's very similar. It's like you've all probably heard this growing up or anything like that, where if you identify to someone that you are a witch or you practice witchcraft, they're like, ooh, you're a witch. Are you going to curse me? Going to turn me into a frog? And it's like, okay, rub those two little brain cells you have in your head together and come up with something original, because we've all heard it. So it's like, it's always really, when somebody asks, are you a witch? There's always that pause of, yes, but no. Maybe, sort of, And it's the same, has that same negative feel to it, as, like the word gypsy as well. Yeah. It has the same kind of negative name tag to it that people come up with, and because again, gypsies were ostracized just like witches were. They lived on the outskirts, they didn't follow all basic societal laws, and a lot of them had a lot of folk magic as well. Yeah. But it's really hard to answer that question, because I don't mind the word witch, but when somebody asks, are you a witch, I always seem to find myself pausing before I say yes or maybe or no.
From my understanding, you guys are from gypsy backgrounds, if you don't mind me saying that.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, which is awesome, interesting.
Can I interject just for a second? The word gypsy.
Oh, yeah.
I feel there needs to be...
Romani,
right? Because yes. I have been told...
But the reason they're saying it is because it's a collective, people don't understand.
They're allowed to say it.
What a Romani is.
This is where I was like, okay, I think we need to elaborate here a little bit, because I have been told I am not allowed to say that word.
Okay.
So...
It's fair.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify... Are you insulted if I say it?
No. Not at all.
No.
For a bigger audience, it's tricky.
Yeah.
But we've explained it now, at least.
Yeah. Would you prefer if we use the term Romani?
Yeah.
I'm not easily offended. You can say whatever you want. It's not going to bother me.
I think because our background stems from Ukraine, Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova,
Polish.
It's all in that circle of areas. So to say we are Romani specifically, I think it's more broad than that.
Okay.
So to say gypsy would be more correct in our case, and we grew up being called gypsy as a good thing, without that negative connotation. So we are very comfortable with that.
And we're in Canada, which also we don't. You know what I mean? We don't carry the stigma as much here, because when I say gypsy, I don't think hate. I think cool.
Yeah. That's absolutely 100%.
So go ahead.
Sorry. Oh yeah. So I can actually kind of relate, because I am of Indigenous descent. Me and my mom are mixed, and so it's a hard line to walk on, because I do practice witchcraft. I practice I am a witch. And I can manifest, and I've practiced this craft for 12 years, whatever it really is. It's just so eclectic. But I'm also part Indigenous, and Indigenous practices were demonized and by the church and the government deemed as witchcraft, devil practices. And so I walk this fine line of wanting to represent my Indigenous ancestry and embrace my features and wear Indigenous art and Indigenous fashion. But then also I'm calling myself a witch, and so a lot of people don't understand the layers behind that. And I feel it's the same with when people are like, oh, all gypsies are these witches, and in the bad way, right? And so it's the same thing. It's I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I feel where it's I'm walking this fine line of how do I respectfully represent my indigenous side without entangling it with the term witchcraft, even though it influences it. So it's like it's walking that fine line, because if I say I'm a witch, most people will, assume all the devilish stuff, make all those assumptions. And then I don't want them to tie that to indigenous practices, to tie those negative thoughts about witchcraft to indigenous practices. So I don't know how you guys feel with having that also like cultural identity as well. That sometimes like can mesh, but yeah.
Well, I do find that it's not as difficult for us because we don't have, like, you have your indigenous family and, like, you have that around you. We don't really have anyone else, any culture or anything like that with us. Not a lot of the rest of our family does anything like that. So we don't have that kind of conflict.
It's like mutt status.
Yeah,
kind
pretty
of.
much.
Now, something you said about entangling, like your indigenous kind of entangles into the witch aspect. The way I see it is, at least from my perspective, is that my line drawn in the sand as a witch or as a conduit is straight, and my line in my life that is Romani or a gypsy runs parallel.
That's okay. So I'm not the only one that like kind of sees it that way.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Because I've had so many people being like, oh, it's like make it part of your witchcraft because it's pre-Christian practices. And it's like, yeah, but that's how they were demonized. And I don't feel comfortable calling my specific indigenous practices witchcraft, even though they do influence my witchcraft.
Yes.
Because
but
there's
they're
a
also
lot.
older.
They're older, yeah, that's just it. My witchcraft is so eclectic, and it's something that I like custom made my own. And there's indigenous influences, but I'm not going to use a specific indigenous practice and say I did a spell. That's just, oh my goodness. I think elders and like the whole community would just be like, excuse me? Like, what'd you say?
My comment was actually on the original question. The word witch being like, and the connotations with the ostracization and stuff like that. I'm a little strange. I revel in the fact that labeling myself a witch makes me other, makes me different. I mean, like, for me, it's almost like that badge of honor, and it's not why I do it, right? It's not why I call myself a witch. It's not why I practice witchcraft, but it's why I will proudly, in most circles, I don't run around my office at work going like, I'm the witch, because, in corporate circles, that's not always the most appropriate thing to do. But I mean, basically anywhere else, I really don't give a shit. If you're gonna give me a stink eye because I said I'm a witch, I'm like, good. Like, I'm glad I like when it makes people uncomfortable. And I'm a little off like that. But I mean, I've been like that my entire life. I mean, like, in high school, I was that super goth chick running around, making people uncomfortable with the way that I looked and the way that I talked and the things that I did. And it's just an extension of that, right? Like, I've constantly in my life put myself in those circles intentionally, willingly, gloriously, acceptingly put myself in those circles because that's where I'm comfortable. That's where I want to be. And it's not like I'm there out of society shunning me and throwing me over there. Like, I'm just like, I'm gonna go sit with them because I don't like you guys.
Yeah, I was the weird little goth kid in my family,
Right,
and
like,
school as well.
Yeah, like, it's just so I understand where people that don't share that excitement of being the person in the weird circles, I get where people are uncomfortable with it, especially, I mean, like, if it's a new feeling for them, I revel in it. That's like my happy place.
I find it really interesting you saying that because something that I find really common in witchcraft and when people discuss what witches are is about the interconnectivity and the cyclical awareness that witches have, which plays into, I always talk about feminine and masculine energy. So obviously right now we live in a society that's super dominated by masculine energy, where it's all about achieving, going up, all this. And what's happened with the rise of masculine energy is that we've cut off the really useful parts of feminine energy, which are usually the dark parts, right? Like heralds of death, healing, change, stuff like that, where we're seen as too powerful because we're able to work within these cycles and these interconnections with this feminine energy. So I find it interesting that you say that, and you also, I know, practice like gray magic. Yeah. I was gonna say, or maybe dark, but that it's not all white and light.
I'm not opposed to hexing. I'm not going to run out of my way to do it. I very firmly believe that there is definitely something to the saying mundane before magic. I think you can solve your problems mundanely without magic.
Yes.
I also don't have a problem with throwing a bitch's name in a jar. Like, I don't...
Sticking it in your freezer.
Or in my freezer, or wiping my ass with it. Like,
haven't tried the ass spell.
But
I won't put it in my list.
You write it on a piece of toilet paper. Write their name on a piece of toilet paper, and wipe your ass with it, and flush the damn toilet. Bye.
I was just telling Kory about that I found that online.
No.
I found it on Reddit, and the girl said she saw it on TikTok of the toilet paper. No. You can use it for banishing or hexing, and I actually wrote it down in my journal to put it in my grimoire for later. And it was just, I loved it because it was so simple.
Yep.
It was so just an everyday, being able to use just everyday items and just
no ritual, no special just things required.
Throwing it out there.
I wanted to add something. Mundane before magic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, yes, absolutely. Do magic for small things. That's what kind of keeps your spark alive when you have dormant times. But on Facebook, being on Facebook witch groups, I see and I'm a past social worker, and so I'm like, there's a way for you to address this issue, and a spell's not going to fix it. It's a spell if you don't meet it halfway. If let's say you want a job, if you don't go out applying for a job's not going to just knock at your door.
You can't do a spell to get a job and not apply for jobs. You've got to put the mundane work into it.
The spell has to be boosted by your actions. You have to meet...
You have to create a path for the magic to work.
Exactly.
So if you're not putting the mundane work into whatever the outcome of your spell is.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even with a hex, right? I mean, like, or a banishing. I mean, if you're having an issue with somebody and you want to banish them, but you are not doing anything in your mundane existence to get rid of that person,
you're not
your spell is not going to work.
Yeah.
You got to block that person from your social media and your phone. You've got to stop engaging in conversations with them. You need to create those physical mundane barriers for your magic to actually work.
It's like wishing to win the lottery but not playing the lottery.
Right?
Yeah, you're just going to find the lottery ticket on the sidewalk, which could happen. But it's your spell's going to be like, how am I going to make this happen? How am I going to make this person drop their winning lottery ticket on the sidewalk and my person comes and finds it?
I mean, well, it's the same thing as, I mean, like with the job, going back to the job example, right? You could do a spell to get a new job.
Yeah.
And not do anything. And you very well could possibly get a new job.
You could scroll on LinkedIn
But no, I mean, like, you could just have a friend offer you a job, right?
Yeah.
But that could happen tomorrow. That could happen next week, next month, next year, like whenever, right? If you're not actively out looking for it, when you put that mundane work into it, you are increasing the possibilities of that coming to you now.
And I
when
see
you want it.
So many people on these witch groups that just say, can somebody give me a spell for this little problem? And it's like,
find the love of my life. I'll never leave my house, but I just want him to show up.
And they won't put any effort into finding that information for themselves.
Yeah.
I have no problem with sharing my knowledge and my experience with people, but put some effort into it. You got it. Like, I mean, you're like, oh, I want a job a spell to find a new job. Okay, well, what have you done? Like, have you done anything on your own? Have you researched anything on your own? Like, do you have any, like, examples of things that you might want to try and you have questions about that? Or do you just want me to give you a spell because you're too lazy to look it up? And we live in an age where, like, we're so blessed that resources for witchcraft are abundant. They're everywhere. And everywhere. Like,
So I was just gonna say it almost diffuses. It's too diffuse. Like there's just too many options.
Yeah.
And it's like people don't try that much. Yeah, because they're just like they try a little bit of everything and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But a lot of people I find aren't aware of what they call like the probability of magic, where if I decide I want to be the president of the United States, I'm not American. I don't live there. I'm not a man, so that's a challenge. But there's these limitations, right? Whereas if I decide I want to, get a new job in the field I already work in, it's like, okay, we could probably pull this off.
Yeah, you can. Somebody could offer you something like a promotion or a transfer, or
And that's the probability of magic. But most people aren't aware that magic always works better. Like you said, if there's a channel or something that it can move along to allow it to happen, right?
And it always helps to put that out in the universe that you want.
This isn't the Harry Potter universe. You can't like wave your wand and make things just appear.
It'd be so nice,
right?
But it makes me think what you were saying, that you're being an artist, and one of the things I always hear, it's like if you're an artist, tell people you're an artist. So it's same with you can say I'm not applying for jobs, but even telling your friends that you don't want your job anymore and you want a new job is a form of helping. It's a lot of times we're so afraid to claim what we want.
There's a book, Jason Miller's Elements of Spellcraft. I don't know if any of you guys have read it. I recommend it to everybody, new witch. If you're a new witch or you're an experienced, it is fabulous. It is so great, and like he breaks down all of these things that we're talking about, right? And he's got an entire chapter on like you need to express your desire to the universe. Or to, but it's not just, it's not just your guides, but I mean to your friends, to your family, to whatever, because that's how you're spreading that magic around, right? You've got to tell the world what you want.
And I follow on that.
Yeah.
So expressing what you want is so important, because me and my mom were having a discussion on ancestral work, because she worked with our ancestors as well. And we were talking about how when we first started the craft, we got a lot of fluffy bunny stuff, and people were just like, you just have to think it, and your ancestors or the universe just can read your mind. And it's like, no, you have to talk to your ancestors or your guides, whoever's helping you, because they can't read your mind. Personally, I don't believe that. And I found that a lot of my manifestation and a lot of the things that I've been trying to be on track for has been happening the more I literally verbally talk to them. And because now they can hear you, and they're not just there like, you seem sad today, what should I do to cheer you up, because I don't know what's up. And the other thing too, it's with like doing spells to help you. An example is I'm currently looking for another job. And so my best friend had an AGM, and it was like this award party thing that happened.
What's an AGM? Sorry.
Annual general meeting. Annual general meeting. Yeah. And so I was invited because her husband couldn't make it. So of course I'm her second husband. And so I said, okay, well, that's one of the places I actually applied to. And so I'm going to put a glamour spell. All night, people were coming up to me, complimenting the dress. People were like introducing themselves to me. And I am so introverted. Like the first thing I did at the awards party thingy was that I went sit in a corner and ordered a gin. And this one lady was like, I'm alone too. Can I sit with you? And then it just, one by one, people just start to approach me from the organization that I applied to. And now it's like, hey, doesn't guarantee I'll get the job, but at least now they noticed me. They have a face to my name. So then when they see the resume, they'll have an idea of who I am.
And I find it interesting that you're so introverted from my experience, and yet visually, like, you have beautiful tattoos. You're quite appealing to look at, so it doesn't shock me people are walking up to you. But I do find it funny that you're like, and then I tried to be a shrinking violet, but failed.
It's like I still did the work because I went to this party.
You put yourself out there.
I put myself out there, and when people did approach me, I forced conversation, and it was worth it. I'm not saying it was miserable or anything. I loved it, but being the introvert I am, I know I have to put in the extra work.
You can extend your glamour in those situations to help you with your introvertedness. A lot of people think glamour is just specifically about drawing people to your physical appearance, but you can use glamours to boost your internal confidence, to boost the way you speak to people. and stuff like that too. And I think that's something a lot of people kind of gloss over when you talk about glamour magic. They think it's all about
Visual.
looking pretty.
Yeah.
It's not.
All right, so I'm going to read a quote, actually, because I wanted to get on the topic of Nikka's thoughts on witchcraft.
Oh, yes.
I think this is something I actually posted in a different group instead of our group, but everyone remember to look up the Great North Witches Collective group, because whenever we do these podcasts, we'll ask for people's opinions before. But this one is from Stephanie saying, very basically, a witch is someone who practices witchcraft.
It's perfect.
It's a practice.
Perfect.
You lean like any other on, and not something you were born knowing. And that's a lead-in for Nikka.
I 100% agree. So, I mean, the whole basic conversation here is, I mean, like, what is a witch? This is the base question that we're branching off on here. And in, like, very simple terms, a witch is somebody who practices witchcraft. That's your straightforward, simple answer. I don't think that gender plays into this. I think a man can be a witch, a woman can be a witch. I think if you are non-binary or anything else in between, anybody can be a witch. And then this is where people argue with me on this. I think there is a big difference between being spiritual and being a witch. And I think if you are not casting spells, you are not a witch.
So my question for this, obviously, because I work with elderly people.
Yeah.
So say you were a witch your whole life practicing, and then you just hit the point in your life where you're physically or mentally incapable of practicing the practice anymore. Are you no longer a witch?
So this is where you have to get into the definition of what is witchcraft and what is a spell, right? Because, and I have opinions on this, but let's just run with this very, very popular thing in the whole witchy sphere right now, that intention is everything. It's not, but intention is everything, okay? That basically implies that all you have to do is think about something really, really hard.
Which is what everyone does all the time anyways.
Right. So this is where I have issues with the intention is everything thing, right? If intention was everything, you're not going to have mothers out there with hungry babes. You're not going to have people that are in unfortunate situations, right? Because that mom who loves her child wants more than anything to be able to feed and support that child. And they are thinking about that very damn hard, and they still don't magically have money or food appear in their cupboards. Like, intention is not everything. There is more to it than that. It's an integral part of it, but it's not everything. In response to your elderly question there, I mean, there's lots of ways to do a spell. You know, going back to the toilet paper spell, right? I mean, an elderly person can write somebody's name on a piece of toilet paper and wipe their ass on it. Not all of them. I understand that there are some that can't wipe their own ass, and that's
true story.
That's unfortunate.
I mean, you don't have to wipe. You could just throw it into the toilet with
your nose.
Right?
Exactly. Blow your nose or whatever. So I mean, like, and I mean, even like as far as I mean, like candle magic, you could light a candle.
So right? I think the only thing I would say is, like, for my dementia clients, because obviously I'm a nurse, so I should say this. I think about these things too much. But it's like, do you suddenly transform from a witch because your brain doesn't work that way anymore? It's a hard question.
That is a really hard question. Let me muse that one over.
Because
I think Kory's got something. But let me muse. No? Oh, you're just wanting to eat.
She just wants to eat. Okay. She's getting the chips. I do have a thought on that.
Okay.
Because for me, witch and witchcraft are a reclamation of the feminine energy, and people always get offended. Men can't be witches. Women are. That the idea is that all humans have feminine energy and all humans have masculine energy. Yes. The challenge is that for men, because of the shape of society, they are ashamed to touch feminine energy of their own volition. They're fine with using other people's feminine energy, but having their own it's hard for them to contact because it's so cut off. Yeah. So I'm not saying men can't be witches, but what I'm saying is what I've observed when you look back through history is that what women are doing with witchcraft is reclaiming the full spectrum of what feminine energy is capable of. They're leaving behind the fact that you're only valuable if a man says you are, which is like the visual feminine aspect. It's not that they're not touching on that, it's that they're reclaiming almost, I would say, like the dark goddess. And not saying you have to do dark magic, but recognizing that the full cycle is part of life and that you are in connection with that full cycle is, to me, what being a witch is. And where I find the challenge with the love and light crowd and the sparkle sparkle crowd is that I feel like it's really not that much different than being under the patriarchy, in the sense that you're only doing the part that's socially acceptable.
Well, you're denying like literally half of who you are as a person and who everybody else is as a person. I think it's absolutely insane to walk around and be only love and light. I mean, if you look at nature, I mean, like, I've literally heard people be like, "Oh, well, like there is no such thing as vengeance or revenge in nature," and I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Like, I can't remember the exact species, but there's a species of monkeys. I think they're in like Brazil. I'm pretty sure they were in Brazil somewhere. There was a dog that had killed a pup. Is that what you call baby monkeys? I don't know. Killed a baby monkey. And this troop of monkeys literally went through the entire village and killed every single dog.
Wow.
Nobody trained, like, these are wild monkeys. Nobody trained them to do that. You want to tell me that vengeance and revenge isn't a part of nature? They killed every fucking dog in the town.
And the elephant that came and
Yeah,
killed
that woman.
Yeah.
or stomped on the woman that, I can't remember, killed her baby or something.
Something like that. And then he found her funeral.
And then stomped more on her.
Stomped more on her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Like,
don't get me started on dolphins, because those things are
Right?
vicious. I don't know why
Yeah.
anyone's nearing them.
I'm not shit talking people that are all love and light. If that's what gets you through the day, that's your thing. My opinion is you are literally denying half of who you are.
You're cutting a leg off and trying to jump around.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just crazy.
In my experience, I'm not like I'm a victim of severe bullying. I'm a victim of past relationship abuses and assault and stuff like that. And so it's just mind-blowing that I'm then told that if I use magic to get justice, because let's face it, when a lot of us are assaulted, there's not proof a lot of times, and by the time we do get the guts to come out about it, there's not much that can be done. And I was even told in my case that, like, unfortunately there wasn't enough substance to go to court. And there's even now another case that I'm recently dealing with. So what I was gonna say is that when I say I use dark magic to kind of speed up the justice, I'm then demonized by a lot of those harm none people. And it's like, well, now you're harming me by silencing a victim of violence. You're harming me by silencing my power and my ability to get justice for myself and not beg the justice system to do it for me.
You're prioritizing the abuser over the victim.
Which
Yeah.
is the shape of society anyways. When you
Yeah.
consider that only 1 in 100 rape cases go to trial and 1 in 3 women are assaulted in relationships. Like, the numbers are not in our favor. So you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on something that you had said there, Aédan, about your revenge being dark magic. In many cases, things that are done with good intention aren't always good in the long run. Some things that are done with negative intention aren't always negative, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it is the way you balance things. So if someone who's abusing drugs, say it's someone I know, I want to cast a spell on them to help them, stop doing drugs. That is in good intention.
Yeah.
But that person then all of a sudden struggles, ends up committing suicide. Was that a good thing or was that a bad thing? It was bad for them, but good for me.
Yeah.
So it's intention is, as Nikka said, plays a part, but it's not everything, and nothing can be defined as exactly dark or light.
And that's just it. I don't think getting justice is necessarily dark as in dark as like evil.
Yes.
I think dark as in I had to reach deep within myself to go there and to not feel guilty about doing this to someone who put me through a lot of harm. But yeah, I do agree with everything you said. It's like the intention is what does matter, but yeah, like you also have to judge. Like, are you doing it for yourself or are you doing it for the person you claim to want to help? But in this case, it's definitely not to help them.
Fair.
But
Well, it's kind of like we've discussed before, is there's no cosmic karma Santa Claus out there who's going to take on this. It's like, oh, this person is terrible, so we're going to give them bad karma. And it's like, well, a lot of times it doesn't work that way. Think of like the laws of physics. There's cause and effect. So unless you put that cause out there, a lot of times that effect isn't going to happen. And we can't just wait for some magical being to fix our problems with them. Sometimes you just gotta take that first step.
I always say it's
Make
sometimes,
that splash.
yeah, sometimes you receive the karma and sometimes you are the karma.
Yeah.
So
I'm currently reading, and I don't know the author's name right now. Somebody's gonna have to look it up for me. The Little Work, and it's about infusing like magic into your everyday life. It's what I have. I'm only like on the 3rd chapter. I don't know what the rest of it's like. Don't ask me on how it is. But the chapter that I'm currently reading, he's talking about karma and good magic and bad magic, or white, and we don't really identify it as white and black magic anymore, but they did previously. And the author of this book has done a lot of extensive training in both like hermetic magics as well as like yoga and a lot of like Eastern types of magic. And when he's talking about karma, the way he explained it in this chapter is basically like you get bad karma from the things that you anticipate that you are going to get bad karma from. It is your mindset that makes that bad karma happen. So in the example that you've given, if you are using quote unquote dark magic to ensure that justice is served, do you feel guilty about it? Then you're not going to have bad karma. It's the guilt that you would associate with that would bring that bad karma to you. So basically, bad karma, like you bring your own bad karma, which sounds super shitty to say.
You jinx yourself.
But like it sounds really like it sucks to look at somebody and be like, you did that to yourself.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes there is. I have some people, and I mean, I read birth charts, so it's like some people, it's like they do really have a curse chart where it just feels like everyone has a friend where it's like everything bad happens to them, and you're like, how does this keep happening to you? Like, it doesn't. But there's definitely a lot of people out there that I'd say 90% of the karma is just like, just stop being a jerk.
Right.
Things will get better.
Right.
And
I almost wish that we did have a male witch here, because I'd love to hear a male side of how being a witch is for them, because you've got to imagine how difficult it must be for them, because witches and witchcraft is looked upon as a very feminine thing. Like you said before, that some people say that men can't be witches, and it's like, that's not true. And so it's like they face a whole nother set of trials, that stigma that we don't have to. They get stuck with the stuff we do, and ostracized for being a man doing something that's seen as a woman's thing.
But I would, listeners, we need some men, right?
So from our Great North Witches Collective group on Facebook, Heidi said, "A witch is that person that is wise in the ways of the earth herself and holds all above themselves in an effort to preserve Mother Earth's sanctity." And Nikka has an answer to the elderly dementia client being a witch.
Okay, so I had to think about that, and I had to think about it from a perspective of, what if this was me? Okay, when I'm old and gray and I hit that point of dementia, and I think there's a difference between the title witch and being a practicing witch. I think those are two different things, and I would like to think, out of respect for my years of practice and work, that somebody would respect me enough to continue to call me that, even though I wasn't practicing anymore. But I think at that point it's more of an honorary title as opposed to a descriptive word,
like an action.
Yeah, like
you're a retired veteran.
Right, exactly, right? Yeah. I mean, as a vet, you're a veteran witch. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right, we figured it out. I'd love to talk about gatekeeping. I'd love to talk about whether people find gatekeeping beneficial, negative, if they've had interactions with that, and if it limited you at all in coming forward about being a witch.
oh man. I have some thoughts.
I thought you did.
I think gatekeeping got a negative connotation, got a negative reputation as a word. I think in everything, a little bit of gatekeeping is necessary to keep the structure or the meaning of a word. Okay, I'm going to get some heat for this. I am part of the LGBT community, technically, even though I'm no longer involved with it. And this was actually one of the reasons why. Not the gatekeeping, but the lack of. And so basically, it's like now people are going around saying, I'm gay, I'm a lesbian, I'm bi, but then they're not actually attracted to the sex or gender that would make them that sexuality. Now it's just, I'm queer, so I'm just gonna label what I feel I can express as. And so now there's all these terms that are being used, especially trans and stuff like that, where it's like, what's the meaning of it now? And I think that words and titles have a lot of power. And so as someone who really is actually LGBT, and who has struggled a lot with gender dysphoria. That's a whole other topic, not witchcraft related, but
Possibly. Still on the fringes.
yeah, it's very hard for me to understand because for me, that term queer is something that not only like I had to accept, but it's something that when I wore, I faced risks for it. And I was visibly queer. Even now, listeners might think I'm actually a guy, might think I'm born biologically male, because on the phone, on mics, my voice is even deeper. But I'm actually born female. I no longer have breasts, and I'm very muscular because I work out all the time. I'm not read a lot of the times if I'm dressed more revealing. I'm not read as a biological woman a lot of the times. That puts me at risk. And so when it comes to witchcraft, now I understand that you can have a choice in pursuing witchcraft. It can be a choice. And being queer isn't, but that's where I find it's losing power with a lot of people identifying with a word and not being able to justify it. If you're calling yourself a witch, hey, as long as you can justify how you're a witch, I have no problem. But it's walking around saying, I'm a witch just because I wear a pentacle.
The witch aesthetic.
The witch aesthetic.
I bought a couple crystals. I'm a witch now.
That's just it. Okay, but what are you doing with those crystals? Like, they're just there to look pretty? Because that's, I don't know, like, that's not really witchcraft. That's not a craft that you're doing. So that's what I kind of come from, is that I draw a parallel, even though one is a choice, one isn't. A lot of LGBT-related identities are, like, their titles are losing their original meaning. And that's affecting people with that actual identity. And so that might also blur lines for a lot of new witches too. So we need some type of box. It doesn't have to be a hard metal box. It can be like a flimsy cardboard box.
A swimming noodle built box.
It's a squishy box.
It can be a bit of a flexible box for sure. That everybody can individualize, but at least it's there and you can describe it and you can justify it. And that's where I come from with it, especially being of Indigenous lines too. There's certain things that you just can't call yourself if you're not fulfilling the role. So many people call themselves Two-Spirit. A lot of people that might look like me who look more white. And they're like, well, I have native blood. I'll call myself Two-Spirit because I happen to also be LGBT. Meanwhile, that's not... Being LGBT and native doesn't automatically mean you're Two-Spirit. Two-Spirit was a role that you had to fulfill in your community.
Of being non-binary, essentially.
Basically, yeah. You walked a line, and that was a line that nobody else could walk but you. And so now a lot of Indigenous cultures and nations have been reclaiming the term and saying, no, this is a sacred term. You can't just call yourself Two-Spirit because you happen to have native blood. Because you happen to have native blood and you happen to be LGBT. That's not what makes you Two-Spirit.
It's kind of like people using the term spirit animal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if that offends you because I instinctually do that. I'm like, oh, it's my spirit animal.
In some joking context,
like, even I've done that, but I have been given my totems by my elder. Like, I've done the work. But, like, in some contexts, it's not, like, for me, I can't speak for Indigenous people as a whole, but for me, it's like, I can decipher the context. But I've had people approach me like, oh my god, you're part native? You can totally tell me my spirit animal. Can you tell me my spirit name? And it's like...
It's like people asking me if you can see my aura.
What? Yeah.
Rude.
And it's like, I had to see an elder. Just because you're native doesn't mean you're this mystical being.
You're not?
No! But like natives are always treated like they're this like species of humans that's going extinct, and they're rare and they must be sought out and they're majestic in the
There's
wind.
a TikTok artist where he does recordings where he plays the role of like the native and he talks very
Yes!
normal. And then he does after, he's like, hey, what's up? Like, just very normal. And I love it because that is the typecasting, right?
Yeah.
That's 100%. Same with witches, though, when you think about it.
Now, another thing with being a witch who practices chaos magic and who is eclectic, there's a very fine line. Because we see religion and we see other practices as tools to be used, so we dabble in a lot of different things and we borrow things from other religions, other cultures, symbols, different little rituals or anything like that. And it's a very fine line of cultural appropriation and practicing chaos magic. I think that it's, as long as you're doing it respectfully and you're not exploiting these other things where you're borrowing from, because it's like everyone has basically drawn you a map, and all these different faiths and religions and practices, they are a map, and you're just using what is provided for you to achieve what your goals.
You're building off their
You're
research.
building off of their research.
Yeah.
And as long as you're really doing it respectfully and you're not damaging or putting anything bad on them, then I don't see it as cultural appropriation. But it is a very fine line.
It takes a certain level of awareness.
It's
Yeah.
like finding a recipe online for
Oh no, we just do whatever we want with those.
well,
but
but I mean, it's like finding a recipe for a cake online, and instead of a teaspoon of vanilla, you use a tablespoon.
But to carry on the analogy, my favorite is on the recipe websites where people are like, I switched this, and this. The recipe was horrible. And I love that because it's like, that's very common with witchcraft. We'd be like, it didn't work for me. And it's like, but you don't know what you're doing with it yet. So it's like, you gotta gain the background behind
when you're
it.
looking at witchy recipes, when you're looking at spells online, right? If it's got a bunch of herbs and stuff in it that you don't connect with, it's not something you've ever worked with before, you don't have any personal connection with it, you can't make that association with that herb with the intention of your spell. Well, no shit, it's not going to work because you're not making those connections and you're not working with those energies in that way.
Kory and I just were talking about this in the car on the ride here, that some of the things that work the best are something that you've found online but have tweaked it and changed it to make it your own. And it's like you could just follow the recipe that someone gave you, or you make it your own and make it work for you, and it comes out so much stronger and so much better because you have made that connection with it. We were just talking about this.
Yep.
I would like to say off Aédan's point that it's funny that you say witchcraft or being a witch isn't a choice, because I often say, and this is opposing Nikka's point, that that I say every woman is a witch, but most women don't know it. And because I think of witchcraft as the reclaiming of your ability to access the full feminine energy. So again, obviously saying men, not saying men can't be witches, they have way more work to do than we ever will to access feminine energy, because it's so part of our cycles and our awareness of all of that. But I often think that, it's, to me, witchcraft, being a witch isn't a choice. It's not being a witch is a denial of that access to that part of yourself, for me. But
I think it's anybody, like I said before, I mean, everybody can be a witch.
Yeah.
I do think it's a choice. I do think that it's there inside of everybody.
Yeah.
And whether you choose to flip that switch or not, like that's your choice. I think it has to be a conscious decision. I think you need to consciously decide. Not to say that I mean that people don't accidentally cast spells, because that totally 100% happens. They're just people who are innately
Psychic
or whatever, right? But I mean, I think part of being a witch and claiming that title is that conscious decision to do that.
And that is our episode, witches. Don't forget to follow us. Next month we will be talking about taboo witch practices and ghost stories. Hope that you'll join us. Again, if you're looking for us, our website is greatnorthwitches.com, or follow us on the Facebook group so you can participate. Great North Witches Collective. Catch you then.